You want to win your fantasy football matchup? Well, the formula hasn't changed. You need those players that are going to have huge weeks, rake in those points for you. We call them booms. Here are the guys we think could do that in week 10. I know you're ready to set those lineups for week 10, but first, make sure you get your NFL pick'em set on Underdog. This week, if you sign up for the first time on Underdog, you're getting a freebie. Lamar Jackson just getting 1 yard. That's right, it's the new customer special for anybody who hasn't tried Underdog yet. All you have to do is sign up and use code ENDGAME at checkout. You get that free pick and you get a deposit match all the way up to $1,000 worth of bonus cash. All right, let's start with your first pick, Chris, and you're beginning with the last game of the week.
I am, that's right. Monday Night Football, didn't even think about that, but I'm beginning with Kyren Williams. I think Kyren Williams is going to bounce back in a big way this week and just go off in fantasy. Had that touchdown streak broken last week, but I think he finds the end zone at least once this week because he gets your Miami Dolphins, who kind of turning into a run funnel defense here. They're top 5 against the pass, bottom 3 against the run, and they're allowing over a touchdown per game on the ground. I think Kyren Williams in this matchup finds the end zone at least once, maybe twice. This is a guy last week played 76 out of 77 snaps. That is absolutely insane for any offensive player outside of the quarterback to play that many snaps, let alone a running back. He's averaging over 20 touches per game, third most touches per game of any running back. No matter how much Sean McVay tries to say, like, yeah, we got to lessen his load, we got to take some off of him, he can't help himself. He just gives Kyren the ball over and over again, won't take him off the field. This is a great bounce back spot for Kyren Williams this week on Monday Night Football against an absolute run funnel defense in the Dolphins. Don't be surprised if Kyren Williams finishes as a top 5, top 3, maybe even top 1 running back this week.
Can't disagree at all with that pick. I bet you Kyren does go off. Let's talk about another running back who's coming off a lesser week. Aaron Jones. We thought he would go off last week. He didn't. But here's what he has done the last 2 weeks. He's turned into a bell cow. 21 last week, 19 the week before. And the other thing you know about Aaron Jones is he's still a very good receiver out of the backfield, and he's been used that way. The Jags have allowed the third most fantasy points per game to running backs and the second most receptions to running backs. So this plays to Jones' strengths. Game script is a big part of any running back's potential value, and this week, Minnesota, Jacksonville, feels like a mismatch. It probably will be, because as bad as Jags have been so far, it might get ugly this week because they're all sorts of banged up on offense, on defense. Yeah, I don't know if Jacksonville's going to win another game the rest of the season, but look, whether that happens or not doesn't matter. I know Aaron Jones is in a great spot this week. The usage is there. I think finally the production will be there too. Now, you know, we're going to keep trying to help you win in fantasy. If you feel like we are, give us a like and hit the subscribe button so you can catch all of our videos. All right, now it's time to talk about some big name receivers who also haven't quite boomed lately.
Malik Neighbors definitely has not boomed lately, but I think that changes this week because he gets that very nice Carolina Panthers matchup. Panthers obviously give up a lot of points to wide receivers, but they specifically give up a ton of points to wide receivers on the outside. They are allowing the third most points to outside wide receivers. Malik Neighbors plays on the outside over 75% of the time. Also, the Panthers lead the NFL in playing cover 3 defense. Almost half the time they're in a cover 3 shell. Malik Neighbors has a 3.04 yards per route run against cover 3. That is 10th most against all wide receivers. Oh, and what has really been lacking from Malik Neighbors? It's not targets, because this guy has had at least 7 targets in every game. He's had 11 or more targets in 5 out of 7 games. It's the touchdowns, because he's stuck with Danny Pennies. Can't score any touchdowns, but you know what? This week he's finding the end zone because the Panthers also allow over a touchdown per game to wide receivers. And I'll tell you what, on Underdog, I rarely take the touchdown pick'ems, but I'm going to take Malik Neighbors higher than half a touchdown this week because I think he's going to score against this hapless Panthers secondary. And if you do take that pick and you pair it with that Lamar Jackson new customer special, that's an easy way to get a W right out of the gate. Just make sure you use promo code ENDGAME when you sign up so you get that new special plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash.
Now, Devontae Adams is a player that we haven't had as a must start probably all season that I can remember. So we saw him finally have a good fantasy game as a Jet last week. That's encouraging. 11 targets. We knew the targets would be there, but 7 catches, 91 yards, and that touchdown. So the target share already there. We know this. Also, keep in mind, Alan Lazard, Rodgers' other BFF, he's out. He's on IR. Mike Williams just got shipped off. He got traded finally. And so yeah, the targets are definitely going to be there. And as far as the matchup goes, it's actually even better than I thought. Arizona maybe isn't one of the worst pass defenses in the league in terms of how much they've given up yardage wise and whatever, but they actually allow the 5th highest EPA per dropback. Arizona also happens to play zone at a pretty high clip, 70% of the time, and that plays into Devontae Adams' strengths. Chris, you mentioned this before. Adams is not a guy who can just beat man coverage over and over again like he used to, right? Maybe that isn't there anymore for him. It's not an elite receiver, but against zone, yeah, he's doing his thing. He's still one of the better receivers in terms of efficiency there. And with the targets there, and hopefully Arizona's offense can kind of click like they did last week, this game might be a little bit of a sneaky high scoring game. And Adams, well, I mean, he's not a sneaky play anymore, but he might be a lot better than people expect. We got a few more boom picks for you. Let's get a little bit deeper. These might be flex options in a lot of leagues, or at least not guys that are must start. So who you got in mind?
I got Tyrone Tracy in mind. I think Tracy might be a borderline RB1 this week going against that Carolina Panthers defense. Still the worst run defense in the NFL. Still missing 2 of their most important run stoppers on defense. You look at Tyrone Tracy, I know he didn't go off last week, but the last 2 games he's played, he's averaged over 20 opportunities in each of those games, and he's gotten all 4 of the red zone touches for the Giants backfield. Then you look at the Panthers, they're allowing the most yards to running backs, the most touchdowns to running backs, over 4 receptions per game to running backs, the 12th most receiving yards to running backs. They're terrible. This is a great spot for Tyrone Tracy, and you don't have to worry about game script getting away from the Giants this week because it's Bryce Young and the Panthers, who might actually be worse than Daniel Jones and the Giants. So I know Tracy last week disappointed in a spot we thought he could, have a good game, but I think he bounces back big time this week. And again, I think he's a borderline RB1 in 12-team leagues.
So I mentioned Juwan Jennings of the 49ers as a waiver wire ad. A lot of people have just forgotten about him because between the bye week and the hip injury the week before, he hasn't played, right? It's been a couple weeks, out of sight, out of mind. I'm definitely picking up Jennings where he's available, and I'm playing him this week because, well, let's start with the matchup. I was going to talk about the matchup. Come on, it's Tampa Bay. The Tampa Bay Bucks, who, again, just made DeAndre Hopkins look like he was 10 years younger. Tampa Bay Bucks, who are still one of the worst pass defenses out there. They've given up over 20 PPR points to opposing receivers 5 times. I actually dug into the data and I didn't realize the Niners are one of the leaders in terms of offenses in deep throws. Over 7 deep targets per game. That qualifies as throws of 15 or more yards. Props to Brock Purdy. He's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in catchable rate, meaning he's good at hitting his receivers in stride. So he's throwing it deep, he's throwing it well. Juwan Jennings, believe it or not, has the 5th highest win rate among all wide receivers who have run at least 50 routes. So he's getting open. He's getting open frequently, he's getting open against any type of coverage, and now he gets one of the worst secondaries out there. So I think Jennings is such a smash spot. If you forgot about him, no, pick him up if he's there, and then put him in your flex spot if you can. All right, who you got next?
I got another running back, and that's Najee Harris. And man, Najee Harris has been rolling lately, and I think he continues to roll this week against the Washington Commanders. When you look at the Commanders' fantasy points, you might think like, okay, this isn't great. They're kind of middle of the road. But when you look at them as an actual run defense, they're one of the worst. They're giving up the 5th most yards per game to running backs and the highest yards per carry to running backs. Over 5.2 yards per carry to running backs this year. You look at Najee Harris. I said he's been rolling his last 3 games. 14 carries, 106 yards. 17 carries, 102 yards. 19 carries, 114 yards. He's averaging 6.1 yards per carry over the last 3 games. And he's thrown in 2 touchdowns to boot, so it's not like he's just a high floor guy. He's actually got a bit of a ceiling. And the other thing about this game and the Commanders, it feels like the Commanders have this high-powered offense that's scoring a ton of points, but they really don't. They kind of are an offense that gets close to scoring but doesn't finish a lot of drives, so the games stay relatively competitive. So I'm not worried about Najee Harris getting game scripted out in this game or anything. He fits his Arthur Smith run blocking scheme perfectly. He's been playing great lately, and now he gets a great matchup coming out of the bye. Go ahead, roll out Najee Harris as an upside RB2 this week.
All right, from looking for an upside flex, I'm going to roll out Khalil Shakir in my lineups. And he's usually a guy you think of, a decent floor. Sure, maybe he can score a touchdown, but you don't think big game. I think he could have a big game this week for a few reasons. So first of all, we have to appreciate just how good he's been. He's been excellent, specifically at beating man, but also just in general. He's fourth, again, among all receivers in fantasy points per route run. Over the last 3 games, Buffalo's become more pass heavy, even if it's a neutral game script situation or even when they're leading. In fact, of the last 3 games, Buffalo has passed the ball at least 33 times. And 2 of those games were blowouts, right? They didn't really need to, but they're doing it anyways. And that's just because they feel more comfortable with that receiving core. But here's the problem. Emerging rookie Keon Coleman got a wrist issue. Sounded like he might not play this week. And in fact, there's some concern he might not play beyond this week. I know it's too early to make that declaration for sure, but it's definitely a possibility that Coleman is out. Amari Cooper coming off of an injury. Not sure, but even if he plays, is he really finding his footing in this offense as of right now? We're going to have to see more Shakir out there. We're seeing more pass attempts. We're seeing more targets go his way. And it's a great matchup against the Indianapolis Colts, who happen to give up a lot of points to receivers, specifically on the inside. And let's turn our attention to the quarterback and tight end position. Chris, give me a guy you think could have a big game as a streaming option.
You talked about Brock Purdy, that matchup against Tampa Bay. I think Brock Purdy is going to have a huge game this week against that secondary. We just saw Patrick Mahomes have his first 3-touchdown day, I think, since like mid-season last year or something crazy like that. Why can't Brock Purdy do that this week? Should have Debo back, got Juwan Jennings back, has Kittle there, and oh, by the way, he might even get Christian McCaffrey back, which I think is huge for his fantasy value. Those dump-offs, those checkdowns of McCaffrey, that McCaffrey can turn into touchdowns on his own. Brock Purdy, like you said, he's been great throwing the ball this year, been great on those deep passes. He's got the yardage in most games. What he's lacking is those touchdowns. Kind of the same thing that Mahomes was lacking going into last week. Was putting up yards, but not touchdowns. That changed. It's going to change for Brock Purdy this week, too. Brock Purdy out there on a lot of waiver wires because he didn't play last week and he hasn't been putting up big games. If you need a streaming option, I think he's your best bet.
Well, Kyle Pitts is probably not on waiver wires anywhere, but a lot of people will now go back to doubting him after a down game. Did basically nothing last week, even though it was a terrific matchup. But come on, it's the Saints this week. Fire up all your Falcons, and look, if Drake London doesn't play, which is still very much in question as of right now, just going to need to be even more involved than usual. He was coming off a string of 4 straight good games. We had gone for at least 65 yards. We can't let one bad game just all of a sudden throw us off of him completely. And this week, you're going against the Saints. How can you not start Kyle Pitts? So if it's between Pitts and any other tight end other than the elite, the must starts that we talk about in our start sit video, you have to go with Pitts. And this pass defense has been so bad. Guess what? They just got worse because they traded away Marshawn Lattimore, their best corner. Kool-Aid McKinstry is going to be out again, most likely. This team is a dumpster fire. Take advantage of it. If you didn't catch those start sit videos at every position, it's all right here in the Week 10 playlist.